Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Clare Boothe Luce Center for Conservative Women. My name is Kimberly Begg. I have the honor of working here at our headquarters with our wonderful staff to educate, mentor, and promote conservative women. We are the only group that specializes not only in passing on conservative ideas to young women, but really taking a special interest in mentoring those young women for conservative leadership. Our core programs include internships, and really that is our signature mentoring program. Also campus lectures. And our campus lectures are really our best opportunity to help young women develop leadership experience on their campuses, and also our summits and seminars. And often it's through our summits and seminars that young women are introduced not just to the Luce Center for the first time, but to the conservative movement for the first time. Now, an important aspect of our work is not just reaching out to young women, but also supporting and promoting somewhat older conservative women who are really the rising leaders of our movement. Which is why I am thrilled to introduce you to today's speaker, Margaret Olohan. Margaret is a senior reporter covering culture and politics for the Daily Signal. She previously wrote for the Daily Caller and the Daily Wire, where she first reported the story of Riley Gaines. Now, Riley Gaines has become an absolute superstar for young women. She is probably the speaker who is most requested of the young women who come to our programs. And we are so grateful that Margaret broke Riley's story and that Riley has been so generous in speaking to the students who go through Luce's programs. Now, Margaret is bold, unafraid, and unapologetic about her reporting of stories that are aimed wholeheartedly at the pursuit of truth and justice. She has an upcoming book that she will be talking about today. The book is called Detrans, True Stories of Escaping the Gender Ideology Cult. And this book gives a voice to young people who have suffered through puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones and just gruesome gender-affirming surgeries, all at the hands of adults. Often who are entrusted to the care of the young people who are going through just these awful atrocities. Margaret's book is going to be released May 28th. She would have loved to have brought her book and to have signed books for all of you. It is not available, but she has promised to come back and sign some books for us. So we will be in touch with all of you about how you can get a signed copy of Margaret's book. So we are delighted to have her here with us today. Please join me in welcoming Margaret Olohan.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much to Kimberly and the Conservative Women's Network for having me here today. This is an honor, and I myself was able to go to one of the events in Orlando, I believe, many years ago when I was in college, not too long ago. And I very much enjoyed it and was so inspired by all the speakers there. So thank you to all that you do. I'm grateful to be talking to you all today about my new book, Detrans, True Stories of Escaping the Gender Ideology Cult. I'm lucky enough to be a reporter who's someone trusted enough to write about something that I'm very passionate about. And I first began writing for the Daily Caller News Foundation in 2019, focused on sharing culture stories that other reporters weren't paying attention to. For the past 5 years, I've worked really hard to share stories that our establishment media is either not interested in telling or is willfully omitting for ideological reasons. There are so many of these omissions that, frankly, it makes my job kind of easy. We're talking about stories of abortion survivors, of persecuted pro-life activists, of business owners targeted by the government with unlawful coronavirus mandates, of parents who face lawfare for wanting to raise their children in accord with their religious beliefs, and of young people who trusted medical professionals who harnessed their distress and told them that they could become whatever gender they wanted to be. I've always recognized that stories and storytelling have an incredible power to change hearts and minds. We see this through Hollywood and the complete chokehold grip that cinema and entertainment has on influencing our society. But when I started reporting on these types of stories, it struck me even more forcefully that that when it comes to massive issues related to life, dignity, and the human person, there is nothing more powerful than a person's lived story. This is their lived experience, their emotions, their vulnerability, and their regrets. You cannot take that away from them. And in sharing their story in their own words, you give a glimpse of their life to the world in a way that analysis or commentary or opinion pieces just can't do. And that is why I wrote this book, an intimate look at the stories of detransitioners who tried to do the impossible, to become another gender. My first real exposure to detransitioners, these young people usually, who tried to change to another gender and before realizing it was impossible and detransitioned, was on Twitter around 2020 or 2021. A few young women had bravely come forward and revealed that they had tried to transition to become boys, had suffered unthinkable atrocities through surgical and hormonal interventions, and now wanted to share their stories. They were very rare at the time. I'm specifically thinking of one young woman named Grace, another named Helena, who's in my book. I followed them, paid attention to their stories, paid attention to who they were interacting with, and began following and kind of circulating in their circles online. One day they mentioned that they were having a Twitter Spaces event where they planned to talk about their detransition stories. There were no other reporters in this. It was just a big group of people online talking about their detransition. So as I made dinner, I joined the event and I began listening to their stories. I was unable to eat dinner as I made it, tried to eat it, could not because I was so overcome by how horrible their stories were. One individual with a deep voice would speak and then reveal that she was actually a woman. Her voice had been permanently messed up by testosterone. Another individual with a feminine sounding voice would speak and reveal himself to be a man. He had been on estrogen for quite some time. The women who had been on testosterone described testosterone rage, the inability to cry, their inability to scream, incredibly intense sexual urges unlike anything they had ever known. One man who had been on estrogen said that he had an uncanny ability to multitask. He wasn't sure if it was in his head or not, but he believes he lost that ability once he stopped taking estrogen. There was a deep sadness in this conversation. I could tell that these people felt they had been duped. They weren't politically conservative. They didn't even seem to care that much about politics, but they had trusted health professionals with their lives, and now they had to deal with the repercussions. As I followed these storylines over the next several years, I was also reporting on this burgeoning idea of gender-affirming care. And I would like you to put that in air quotes whenever I say it, since it's not a real phrase. We've all heard of it by now. It's purposefully vague, artfully nebulous. It's a euphemism, and it masks the grisly realities of attempted transgender sex change procedures such as hormones, puberty blockers, and surgeries, even for minors. And as I watch the liberal media over and over again tell the public that all major medical organizations endorse gender-affirming care, I watch them tell the public that all the experts endorse gender-affirming care. I watched as the Biden administration touted gender-affirming care, warning that kids who could not access this care might commit suicide. And that's a lie that's frequently told to parents, both by experts and by doctors. I watched as the media fearmongered over and over again about anti-trans laws pushed by Republicans that would ban trans youth from accessing this so-called care. The reality of the matter is that so-called gender-affirming care is experimental. As the expose of the WPATH files earlier this month shows, the experts promoting gender surgeries and hormones are fully aware that the procedures can halt and destroy fertility, produce tumors and cancer, destroy sexual function, and to put it bluntly, completely fail. A man cannot become a woman. A woman cannot become a man. And yet that is what these experts are promising. And that's not all. They're promising more spiritual concepts, self-fulfillment, satisfaction, and happiness. And I think that's the greatest betrayal of all. This idea that happiness is on the other side of the hell that is surgical and hormonal transition. Chloe Cole is one of the young women whose stories I share in Detrans. And if you're familiar with the detransitioner movement, you've probably heard Chloe's story before. She's one of the most high-profile and outspoken detransitioners and advocates who frequently testifies at both the state and national level. Through hours of interviews, Chloe and I spoke about her experience, and I learned some details that I include in Detrans, but a little bit that I'll share with you today. She struggled in school as a little girl. She had a hard time making friends with girls. She was a little bit of a tomboy, and her siblings were all adults by the time she felt like she could hang out with them. She also thinks she was on the autism spectrum. So she was lonely, she was struggling, and like many other detransitioners, she turned to the internet at a very young age. I want everyone to try and put themselves in the shoes of an 11-year-old girl at this point, who's going through puberty. She's largely alone, she doesn't have a lot of friends, and she's pretty much unsupervised on the internet. Chloe was 10 when she was exposed to pornography for the first time. She was 11 when she made her first Instagram account. And she was inundated with these images of sexy, voluptuous women who go on exotic vacations and post basically pornographic images of themselves as if it's totally normal. They're validated by the likes and appreciation of many, many thousands of men. Chloe told me, "Little did I know that as soon as I made my first Instagram account at 11, I would immediately be recommended, no, bombarded, with trans-identifying kids, unachievable body standards, and even softcore porn. I never stood a chance because that was just the beginning." Chloe didn't think she could ever be the kind of woman she was seeing online. Confident, beautiful, perfectly sculpted, demure, and yet also sexually aggressive. After all, she was a little girl going through an awkward stage in her life and being exposed to concepts that she should not have even known about yet. Combine that with the way that she was seeing that women are depicted in pornography. Chloe and other detransitioners have told me that the experience they saw on pornography did not look fun. It looked terrifying and scary. The men looked happy and the women looked scared. Without becoming too crass, we know that women are treated as objects of sexual gratification and lust in pornography, often in brutal and disgusting ways. Unsupervised on the internet, Chloe was exposed to all of this. And being a woman began to look not only unachievable, it began to look undesirable. No one had ever told her that puberty is universally a challenging and scary time for young people. What she was told by the people and the pages that she was finding online was that the solution to her distress was maybe that she wasn't a girl, that she was a boy, and she was in the wrong body. Chloe's story is incredibly sad. She did undergo a gender transition or an attempted gender transition. She took testosterone, and we detail the effects that had on her body in my book. She also underwent a double mastectomy at 15 years old. The doctors and surgeons removed her breasts forever. As a minor, her parents had to provide permission for Chloe to undergo these surgeries. And so, of course, they did the unthinkable. They agreed to these procedures. Something that I learned in writing this book is that the parents who gave permission for these surgeries over and over deserve our empathy as well. They were manipulated, they were lied to, and they were told by many doctors and surgeons, would you rather have a dead daughter or a living son? That's a threat of death if parents don't comply. Now that Chloe has detransitioned, she realizes the full gravity of what was taken from her. Her chest has not fully healed from the surgery. She still has wounds that leak. She continues to experience physical side effects from years of testosterone, including aching in her shoulders, vision impairment, potential loss of fertility. She doesn't know if she can ever carry a child. She will never be able to breastfeed. She doesn't know if she'll ever be able to, well, she won't ever be able to nurse her child. Chloe's story that I've shared with you today only scratches the surface on the details about Chloe and other detransitioners that I share in this book. But I hope it gives you an image of the incredible betrayal that occurred here by the medical community. Chloe and Luca, Helena, Abel, Prisha, and many of the others in my book deserved honesty. They deserved compassion and they deserved help, not blind affirmation and lifelong medical bills. Because that's another thing that these detransitioners are not told. When you begin taking testosterone or estrogen, you're going to take that for the rest of your life. If you want to pretend to be a man, you're going to need to continue taking testosterone. The next step after testosterone is to get a double mastectomy. The next step after a double mastectomy is to undergo bottom surgery and get a hysterectomy. These things pile on over and over, continue. They're expensive, they're lengthy. The surgeries don't heal. I describe at length in my book about what it is like for a man who's trying to become a woman. It is one of the most gruesome and Mengele-esque things I have ever encountered. How a man's genitals will be removed, a cavern made inside of him to create fake genitals that don't work, that are painful, that never fully heal, and need to be cared for every single day. This is a lie that is told to these people who are mentally ill and distressed and seeking help. They deserved compassion and help, not blind affirmation and lifelong medical bills. My hope with this book is to shine light on the stories of detransitioners by simply telling their stories as a journalist. Like I shared earlier, I have found so often that simply saying someone's story and offering the facts has had a profound effect upon the narrative. These detransitioner stories are compounding over and over again. Their greatest hope is that they exist and they're sharing their stories and allowing other young people to realize, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. This girl went through what I'm being told to go through, and she says it hurt her severely. My hope also is to reach people who might not be interested in conservative commentary on the topic or who are prejudiced against it. But these people have genuine concerns about rampant ideology being pushed down our throats. Americans are not supportive of so-called gender-affirming care for minors. Americans want protections for minors from this so-called care, but they're being lied to at every minute, and they deserve the truth. And I believe that in this issue, like all others, the truth will set us free. Thank you. And I'd love to take questions if anyone has any.
Oh, here. My daughter, and I'm going to cry about this whole thing. My daughter's son is in a Boy Scout troop that also allows girls. And there's a girl in the troop who is a hunter. She's a good hunter. She's about 12. And she camps, loves to be outdoors, loves to carry a knife. And there are women and people who said, you're really a boy. You're not really a girl. You're a boy. Or you're a lesbian. You're not. And Alexis, my daughter, and some other women have taken it upon themselves to say, no, you're not a boy. You're not a lesbian. You're an outdoors woman. And you want to carry a knife? Carry a knife. You want to hunt? Hunt. But they said we have to keep telling her this because people keep saying to her, you're not really a girl because you want to hunt and carry a knife. You're a lesbian. You're not. You're a woman and you can do all these things as much as you like. But Alexa says it's terrible to hear them say this to this girl. And we step in and say, no,
Right.
You're an outdoors woman.
Good for them. That's wonderful that they can stand up for her in that way. And actually, Chloe, the girl I was just talking about, has been one of the biggest advocates recently in talking about tomboys. And I love it. I think it's so important to talk about tomboys and how many girls have interests that we would traditionally ascribe to boys. And it doesn't mean anything except that they have fun doing those things. So I think it's important to emphasize the importance of the tomboy.
They say you're a tomboy.
Exactly, yeah. And those who are ascribing gender to someone, especially if they're adults, they deserve severe scrutiny and, frankly, shouldn't be anywhere near kids.
Hi, I was just wondering if you noticed any other consistent trends in the folks that you interviewed. I know you mentioned Chloe thinks she struggled with autism, so I was wondering if there were any other disorders or mental issues that you found among the people you interviewed.
Absolutely. That was, I spend the first half of the book on the circumstances leading up to transition. So each chapter is kind of everybody's experience at a certain phase in life, just because we know that is so important. how people went down that path. So I think I have a whole chapter on social media's effects on each of these people. But I also have a chapter on family life, and I asked everyone, about their parents and their parents' relationship, whether they practiced any religion, how early they were exposed to pornography, whether there was abuse in their background. Pretty much everyone I spoke to said that they believed they were on the autism spectrum. Many of them had anxiety. One girl whose story I share in depth, but was also really heavily explored by Kelsey Bolar. I don't know if any of you are familiar with her. She's done excellent work on this. Her name is Prisha, and she was severely anorexic. And part of her desire to transition stemmed from a desire to remove fat from her body, to lose weight. And in an anorexia context, doctors would have said, no, you can't do this. You're hurting yourself. You're harming yourself. But in a gender context, she was merely affirmed. And she told me that when she went in for her double mastectomy, she was excited because she knew she would weigh less afterwards. And this isn't something that her doctors even talked to her about. It is truly wild how little science and interest in reality is exhibited and in the actual symptoms of the patients, because anxiety was almost always present. Multiple of the girls were suicidal. Helena, who I mentioned earlier, she went to a Chicago Planned Parenthood to get hormones since she couldn't get them closer to home. And it is incredibly easy to get hormones from a Planned Parenthood. That's one of their big moneymakers lately. So if you go to a Planned Parenthood and you meet with a therapist and you meet their very basic requirements, they'll give you a prescription and you can go pick up your testosterone at CVS. And Helena did that in a 30-minute appointment. And I include all of her paperwork in the book, how she told them she wasn't suicidal right now. So they gave her the prescription. They should not have given her any prescription if she even mentioned that she had been suicidal 2 weeks ago, as she did. So they're ignoring these basic facts here ended up causing her to be in the hospital. And when she went to the hospital, suffering intensely from the effects of testosterone, which I lightly touched on, but the mental anguish that some of these girls went through when they were taking testosterone is horrific. The rage that they experienced, the emotions that they were experiencing from this drug in their bodies. Helena didn't know what to do, so she checked herself into the hospital. And all of her symptoms were stemming from testosterone, right? Well, she checks herself in and they say, okay, you're a guy, so we're going to figure out what's going on, what's wrong with you, you man. Rather than saying, oh, you're a girl who's taking testosterone, maybe we should stop the testosterone or lower your dosage. They just pretended that wasn't a factor and pretended she was a guy. And that's the root of what's going on here. It's ignoring biological realities and facts and pretending other things are going on. And that's coming from our medical professionals, which is incredibly disturbing.
I might get a little upset here too. Just some of the lies that are out there that I'm sure you have discovered. I have a niece who is 21 and she's decided to go by Eric after my dad's first name, thinking that would ease the blow when she told them that she was now a he. That didn't go very well. But his comment to her was, it makes me sad because my line ends with you because you'll never have children. And she said, oh, once I get my man surgery, I'll be able to bear children. So she actually thinks that having whatever that's called, that it'll be functioning and that she can impregnate a woman. And she believes it, and she's so stubborn. And that's, I don't know if you've encountered that.
Well, first of all, I'm so sorry to hear that, and we'll keep her in our prayers. That is not the first time I've heard that. And it is one of the more mind-boggling aspects of this phenomenon where young people are being told just complete biological lies about what they will be capable of. Not to get too gross or too disgusting here, but the surgeries that are done on a woman, for example, to give her male genitalia obviously are incapable of making a functional male genitalia. That just isn't impossible. For a man to have a vaginoplasty, he can have that vaginoplasty, but it's not going to work. And unfortunately, there's no sexual function involved in that kind of thing either. And yet these young people are all under the impression that there will be. And that's a lie that's promoted by activists. There's very manipulative strategies for doing so. There's one gender website that I encountered that has graphics showing girls, like, this is how your genitalia will grow into male genitalia with testosterone, which is just a complete lie in every way possible. It's not going to happen. And so these kids who often have never had any kind of sexual intimacy before are making decisions based on their supposed sexual intimacy preferences that don't exist. And so it is a lie that is worth litigation, absolutely. But it's also an easily disprovable lie. And I think that there are lots of resources that she could be pointed towards to show her that's never going to happen. And that she's being lied to and manipulated. And I know that's a really hard thing for someone to understand, but that is the truth in that situation.
Can you think of an organization or a place off the top of your head that I
Yeah.
could maybe suggest to her?
I would suggest Do No Harm. It's a organization that helps detransitioners. If you talk to me afterwards, I can give you the contact of a detransitioner who has an organization that exists to like warn other people off of this. Her name's Camille, and she is very helpful. So we can chat.
They're being told that their bodies will actually produce sperm or eggs.
No, it's a more vague idea that things will be sexually pleasurable for them with their new crafted genitalia.
Except for my niece, she believes that she could actually.
Her body will produce sperm. That's what she believes.
Wow.
Another question over here.
So, is it?
Yeah. I know your focus is on telling the stories of all these young people, and I think that's wonderful. Have you looked into, and I don't know if you have an answer to it, why the AMA, why the American Psychological Association supports this, isn't questioning this, isn't looking at the well-being of these? What's causing the craziness?
Yeah, it's not my area of expertise, but from what I've seen and the reporting that I've done, it does seem that money is absolutely a factor. The World Professional Transgender Association, that's WPATH, I believe that's what the acronym stands for, they are the group of so-called experts that all the major medical organizations rely upon for their talking points on all of this. So if you read a news story on gender affirming care, like the Associated Press will tell you, let's just say there's a story on Republicans trying to ban transgender care for trans youth. They'll say 1,000% that all major medical organizations support gender affirming care for children. And that's a line that's in pretty much every mainstream outlet's reporting on this. The major medical organizations are relying on WPATH and their recommendations for kids. WPATH just got exposed for all these doctors emailing each other about how one girl got tumors from being on testosterone. They're well aware that it's experimental. One doctor admitted that he knew that I believe it was a female doctor, she knew that her patient couldn't actually provide informed consent. The patient was a little girl who was severely mentally ill. And these doctors are all talking about this, and they're the experts that are giving the advice to all of these major medical organizations. And they were exposed, their emails were leaked, and most mainstream news outlets pretended they didn't see it. And you'll still see that verbiage. So that's something that reporters like myself and some of my friends have been focusing on, is asking people, are you still relying on WPATH guidance here? Because it has been proven to be scandalous.
you'll stay up here for just a moment, Mary Margaret. Here, let's have another round of applause for Mary Margaret Olohan. So, Mary Margaret, a lot of that was really hard to hear. But I just have to say how important it is that you are just this bold, courageous, truth-telling woman out there, just sharing these remarkable stories. So thank you so much for being with us. We have a few parting gifts. This is a Luce tradition. We have a mug here with a quote from the great Clare Boothe Luce. Courage is the ladder on which all the other virtues mount. I think you will appreciate this, Mary Margaret. And I also want to give you a copy of my book. I think that you will relate to it. It is a book about truth tellers who exhibit extraordinary moral courage in their lives, and I think that you will relate to the heroes in this book. So here you go. Another round of applause for Mary Margaret.